We have all heard of texture packing, but in this video I will show you an unconventional technique that might surprise you. But first, we have to look at the most conventional texture packing schemes, which usually pack all of the non-color maps into one texture. This is good, but we still end up with 3 textures in total if we consider the albedo and the normal. As GPU prices have skyrocketed and VRAM has been artificially limited, I propose an unconventional solution to saving the precious resources of your game, especially for VRAM heavy engines like Unreal. What if you could pack the albedo, normal and the roughness all in one texture? As you might guess, this has some limitations, namely the fact that you won't be able to utilize the full spectrum of colors in the albedo. But if you look around, how many real-life textures actually use the full spectrum of color? In my experience, it's usually what you would consider props. But for environment art, stuff that you would use tiling textures for, you'll find that many surfaces are more or less monochromatic. We can simply multiply our albedo channel by a color, and if we really want to, we can also expand the color range by using a lerp node, giving us more control over the color of the shadows and the highlights. The second limitation is having to choose between metallic and non-metallic surfaces in a binary way. For example, making concrete with rebar inside will be hard, as it contains 2 material types in one surface. However, these types of scenarios are very rare. In fact, this is the only example I could think of. To be more precise, I'm talking about the texture itself and not the whole material. Something like a rusty material transitioning from dielectric to metallic is still totally possible by using vertex painting, since we can control the metalness of each layer. The third limitation has to do with compression. You might notice some minor compression artifacts or loss of detail if you squint your eyes. But how can the normal map be packed into the scheme, given that it occupies 3 channel slots? Fortunately, using some vector math, we can reconstruct the normal's blue channel, leaving enough space for packing the roughness. I have gone ahead and made a function out of this. The last step is to make sure that the compression is set to BC7 and to uncheck sRGB. So what is this for? Personally, I believe this technique is perfect for stylized games, where monochromatic materials are a popular style choice and where a tiny loss of detail isn't a problem. Of course, there is nothing stopping you from using this in realistic scenarios, but you might want to have more control of the colors in your albedo. I call this packing scheme NAR or NAR because we can assign the normals to the red and green channels, albedo to blue, and roughness to alpha. I would personally use this kind of packing scheme for vertex painting shaders. This type of shader is notoriously expensive because of the amount of texture lookups. On an RTX 3060, let's assume we use all 4 vertex painting channels. Let's also assume that for each of them we are using unpacked 4K textures, so albedo, normal, roughness, and the height. In total, we will use 16 textures, which will be around 192 megabytes. That's 1.5% of the total VRAM pool. The cost of the lookups also isn't insignificant, which will result in FPS drops. Considering other costs like the operating system, Discord, global illumination, shadows, and volumetric lighting, with this kind of setup you can expect to have around 40 unique materials. But obviously, filling the cup to the brim isn't the best idea. However, with the NAR packing, we can get away with only having 5 textures, 1 per surface and 1 for packing all of our height maps. That's around 74 megabytes of VRAM, 0.6% of the total pool, and virtually no cost on performance. With this setup, you can more than double the amount of unique materials, and considering that realistically you won't use all the vertex painting channels, the real cost is even lower. Not that you will ever need this many vertex paintable surfaces, but I thought it would be a good way to compare. Before ending the video, I know that this whole texture packing thing feels like drawing a circle and then drawing the rest of the owl. There's a reason why this kind of packing isn't popular, and that's because it's kind of artist unfriendly and certainly more tedious to set up. But if you want to give it a try, I've created a simple material maker file that you can use to pack your textures, linked in the description. Here's the workflow. First, create your material. Do this in whichever software you prefer. Make sure that it's more or less monochromatic. You might also want to have a lot of contrast in the albedo for lerping the colors later. Once you're happy with it, export it. Then, simply assign these textures to the material maker file I provided, and you're done. You can export this to whichever engine you want. VRAM has become a luxury, and tech companies are creating solutions to a problem that they have created themselves. For this reason, I think it's important to be aware of VRAM so we can possibly make space for things like real-time GI, which we might want. But of course, this is all about picking your poison. It could very well be that the loss of flexibility of this technique is a deal breaker for your project. I personally believe we can have the cake and eat it too. I want to see more beautiful games that run at a native resolution and at 120 FPS, and this could be one of the steps to achieving that. Thank you guys for watching. You can download the Material Maker file for free on my donation page, alongside many other things. Also, if you want to learn Geometry Node, my friend Radium has made a very cool book. Check it out.